Bill? Hey, Bill? The sound's not working. This happened yesterday. Can I do it without? Hello? Okay, Bill, it's not working.
Hi there, Lisa. I'm here. I just wanted to. I was coordinating on another aspect of this, but I'm here. We're going to have everybody else here in 10 minutes. We're running 10 minutes late, so we're going to be live at 40 minutes past the hour, as per the email an hour ago. But we're very grateful for you to participate with us, and there's going to be 2 more participants on the plenary session.
Okay, thank you. So what was the feedback from yesterday's session?
Well, from my point of view, I thought it went terrific as far as the plenary. We also had a lot of robust discussions among the participants. I think that I need to watch some of the recordings from yesterday's small group discussion to get a more nuanced notion of it, and we're also going to have quantitative data on it based on the survey completions, which we've not yet analyzed. So there'll be both a quantitative aspect and the qualitative aspect, and the videos of both the plenary that we did yesterday and videos from the small groups will both be released in that context. So I mean, I think there'll be multiple ways to evaluate it, but I think that Alice thought it was a terrific panel. and my colleagues in Palo Alto and New York were also pleased with how it went.
Good. Did you get my email to have her correct the name of my law firm?
Yes, I think
It's
she sent me the
it's not
corrected.
immigration. It's immigrants first.
Yes, she corrected that in the revised. So I think that that is good. One thing to mention is we had a change out of Atul Singh for Ron Hera this morning. Ron had an emergency and had to switch off. So Atul Singh is the other plenary participant for the morning session, um, along with Norm Matloff. Uh, Atul is a lawyer and a journalist for the Huffington Post who's written about U.S. immigration for Huffington Post and Al Jazeera and other publications.
Cool.
Absolutely. Did you enjoy it yesterday?
Oh yeah, it was fun. And I know Jim Alexander pretty well, and I've met David, so it was nice to be on the panel with them.
Introducing you now to Norm Matloff.
Hi Norm, I'm Lisa. I can't hear him.
Norm, are you muted?
I'll be right back.
Norm, you're still muted, I think. At the top of the screen, there's a mute microphone button.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Terrific. How are you there?
Good. Do you see me now?
I see you now.
All right. Okay. Okay, great.
Terrific. Good morning, Atul. Uh, let's see when Atul is able to. There we are. Good morning, Atul. Atul, can you hear me? Atul, can you hear me?
Mhm. Mhm.
Excellent. Atul, can we hear you?
Hello.
Excellent.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Hi Atul, I'm Lisa.
Mhm.
Pleasure.
No,
Pleasure to meet you, Lisa.
well, you too.
Norm, you were breaking up a little bit just now.
Am I? Okay. Well,
I
I'm
can
sorry.
hear you well. but let's see. Sorry, I didn't mean to have another phone call right when I asked you to test the mic tool. Welcome to the plenary. We're still 5 minutes away from having all the questions from participants, but looking forward to this getting started. Here more properly, let me introduce y'all to each other. Atul, Lisa, Norm, y'all are hereby officially cross-referenced in this context on the plenary as our leading experts.
Where are you, Atul?
I'm in California.
Ah, what about you, Norm?
I'm in California too. Where are you, Atul? We're in California.
Yeah, at the moment in Belmont.
Oh, okay. I'm in Walnut Creek.
Oh, not far.
Yeah.
I teach political economy at Berkeley, so that's pretty
Oh,
good.
oh, good.
Well, I'm here on vacation in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. My last day of vacation.
Well, it's very, very kind of you to come on a plenary then.
Yeah, I'm looking out at the ocean. It's beautiful.
It's excellent. That's
Lisa,
fantastic.
we're grateful for your taking time out of your vacation to collaborate with us on these plenaries.
It was fun yesterday. I mean, it's very interesting to hear the questions from the public and kind of what's on people's minds. I get a lot of that directly, but it was nice to have it in a more organized format. That was interesting.
Are you an immigration lawyer, Lisa?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
That's my full-time job.
Yeah.
I'm
Well,
also
I just
I'm in a very contentious place in the United States. We had the version of SB 1070 law before Arizona did. We were like a pilot project for it. So my area is a pretty interesting area to practice immigration law in Virginia.
I see. In which area is it?
Prince William County, Virginia, outside of DC.
Oh, well, I know that.
It made international headlines.
Yeah. No, I lived in DC. I began Fair Observer in Washington, DC.
Huh.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And then I fled. I just fled. I found DC. I found DC too much imitation Europe. You know, I've lived around the world and I thought, guys, you're pretending to be Europe, but you lack the charm of Europe and you have all the stuffiness. This ain't worth it. I'm leaving.
You didn't have pearls in a black suit when you were there? That's standard dress code.
I know, and I don't even have hair, which doesn't go down very well in DC. You know, you're supposed to have a full flock of hair, and I'm a brown man who doesn't know my place in
Oh,
DC.
that's true.
In DC, it helps to be white, and if you're a person of color, you're expected to be slightly deferential. And you know, at the end of the day, I am the caricature of a stereotype. You know, I am an old world aristocrat with a family that goes back 1,000 years. So I come with the swagger of a Genghis Khan. So it's very difficult for me to adapt to DC. So you know, I would actually introduce myself as the barbarian from the East, and like the politically correct circles in DC, their faces would fall. Oh, excuse me, pardon me, and I would just laugh. I'd say I'm the barbarian from the East, civilized a little bit in Oxford, but I still have the proclivity to kick skulls around and ride with sabers and torches on horseback. And they would look at me, what did he just say?
Yeah, California would be better for you. Yeah, for sure. It would be better for me, for that matter. I feel like I'm on a mission being in Manassas, Virginia.
So we're just going to be another 1 to 2 minutes, and then we'll be officially ready. We've been gathering the questions and trying to get them ready. The participants are revising them in one last group, and we'll be ready.
Perfect. You know, Lisa, surprisingly, the most open-minded people in the DC, guess who were there?
I have no idea. Actually, yes, I do. I worked for the Institute for Policy Studies. That is one collection of people that is incredibly open-minded, cutting-edge, progressive. They helped bust the Enron scandal, and it's a progressive think tank that I worked on human trafficking issues with, and they're awesome. Highly recommend them.
Okay, okay. I will check them out. Actually, I still go to DC quite often. And but the most interesting people I met tended to be these some of the dissident CIA guys.
Hmm.
They were incredible. I mean, the dissident guys, the guys who opposed George Bush on torture, those guys.
Hmm.
They were very interesting. They much sharper than the State Department people. Actually, no comparison. I mean, the State Department is such an
You just broke up. Oh, well. Okay.
No, I said the State Department seemed fossils in comparison. The CIA guys were much more interesting, which is ironic. You wouldn't expect that.
Yeah, that is interesting.
Yeah. No, I was coming in as a foreigner in a field where people like me don't exist. I focus on world affairs, as foreign policy and international affairs, and that's generally not even an American, that's an English preserve, and to a certain degree French. They have The Economist, the BBC, Le Monde Diplomatique. I mean, Americans tend to be, I hate to say this, a little too insular.
I think there's some think tanks in DC that you would find interesting. For sure, the Institute for Policy Studies would be worth looking into. And when you're in DC, meeting with the executive director there, John Cavanagh, is really an incredible person. Very scholarly. Yeah.
That'll be great. That'll be great. So, I mean, I came to DC with a very express goal of challenging The Economist, because I had debated with people from The Economist at Oxford, and they are the best publication in the world, but they give you an Oxford and Cambridge view of the world.
Mm-hmm.
And that simply ain't good enough anymore because the world has become much more complex. And so the idea was to get perspectives from around the world, Africa, Latin America, Asia, even in the US, places like Mississippi or Minnesota as well. So that was the goal, and so that was the reason I sort of thought DC would be a good place. But I had to flee to the West Coast, and my editing headquarters is now London, and my technical team is in India.
Yeah, I suspect that there's some supporters in DC that you could find. I teach at Georgetown Law School, and I find the law school to be quite progressive and open, and particularly the students. I really enjoy teaching there. They are very public interest minded, or at least the students I've come across have been great to work with. Worldly and open-minded.
I'm a fan of Georgetown too.
Yeah,
sorry, I didn't mean to. If you could finish your sentence, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
I'm good.
Just letting you know that we now have 2 groups who are receiving the 2 of the groups live streaming, and the third is joining for the to do that. So we're about to get officially started. What I was going to share was the first question of this plenary I'm gonna make from group 1. So I'm just going to read the first question twice while we're waiting another 30 seconds for group 6 to receive the live stream, which they're working on momentarily. So I wanted to mention the first question will be, which businesses and industries are supporting specific provisions in the immigration reform debate? Let me repeat that. Which businesses and industries are supporting specific provisions in the immigration reform debate? So let me mention that. That will be the first question, so you're welcome to start thinking about that. In the meantime, what I'm going to do is I'm going to formally introduce each of you. I'd like to hereby open the Sunday plenary session. We have with us a distinguished panel who we're grateful for their taking time on this Sunday to join us to answer questions from the technology community. First, we have Norm Matloff. Norm Matloff is a professor of computer science at UC Davis. He specializes in parallel processing, computer communications networks, data security, and statistics. He formerly worked as a database software developer in Silicon Valley and has written extensively on tech industry labor practices, focusing on the H-1B work visa. Dr. Matloff has also provided expert testimony in litigation on age and racial discrimination in the software industry. He has presented invited testimony to the U.S. Senate and House of Representatives on immigration issues. Thank you, Norm, for joining us. Lisa Johnson-Firth is our second distinguished panelist. Lisa Johnson-Firth is the principal of Immigrants First, an immigration and human rights law firm. She specializes in removal defense, asylum, UNT visas, naturalization, and Violence Against Women Act petitions. Ms. Johnson-Firth also serves as an adjunct professor of law at Georgetown University Law Center, where she focuses on immigrant women and human rights. Our third distinguished panelist, Atul Singh, is a lawyer, current affairs lecturer, and founder and editor-in-chief of Fair Observer, a global affairs analysis site. He has previously worked in corporate law and has spoken on a wide variety of topics in foreign policy, international affairs, and has written about immigration and the global economy. He is also a contributor to the Huffington Post and a columnist for Al Jazeera. Welcome, all of you. So the first question that I would like to begin with is...
Thank you.
Thank you, Atul. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Norm. I'd like to begin with the first question from Group 1. Which businesses and industries are supporting specific provisions in the immigration reform debate? Who would like to begin with that?
I'll defer to my colleagues on that, as the employment-based immigration arena is not my area of specialty.
But what I was going to ask is, I think it's more broad than just employment-based immigration, if I'm reading the question correctly. In the immigration reform debate overall, whether that's for unauthorized immigrants or for employment-based visas, are there industrial lobbies on the on the other aspects of the immigration debate that you do work on? Are they?
I think, I mean, I've only touched these issues a little bit in terms of lobbying work, but it tends to be the businesses who are the primary sponsors of H-1B visas and L visas and that sort of thing that are lobbying for change. You know, I'm sure the computer industry has been, and some of the agricultural landscaping firms who would like to have the seasonal workers. But I don't represent those employers, so I do know that the employers who hire those workers often are engaged in lobbying Congress for more visa allocation. It's just I don't have intimate knowledge of that, as I don't represent those clients.
Got it. Thank you very much, Lisa. Let me ask Norm, would you like to address this question?
Well, you know, I would point out the obvious. Anybody reading the newspaper these issues has probably noticed this organization called FWD.US, which was started by Mark Zuckerberg of Facebook, and has a number of prominent Silicon Valley firms as members. Dropbox is a good one. I'll probably mention them again later on. And they are lobbying not only for the employment-based immigration, but also to do something about the unauthorized. To me, it's very clear, and we'll probably get into this later, it's very clear what the motivations are in terms of the employment-based immigration, and that is for cheap and immobile labor. The word immobile is very important. We'll probably get into that as well. I might mention, just kind of for fun, that I was actually at a meeting of FWD. In a weird way, they actually invited me to a panel, and I didn't realize the panel was going to end up being kind of a strategy meeting for that organization. But some insights there that might be mentioned later on.
And the second part of that question, Norm, I just wanted to see, the first part was businesses, and you mentioned Facebook and some individual companies that are part of Forward.us. Do you want to comment on the other question of what industries have supported specific provision in the immigration reform debate?
Well, again, we're talking about the tech industry in particular. There are other industries, if you want to use the term broadly. The immigration law industry is certainly one. My own industry, if you want to call it that, academia, has always been at the forefront of lobbying on Capitol Hill for various provisions in immigration law.
Thank you. Atul, would you like to address this question?
Yeah, sure. I mean, obviously, what Norm has said, Forward.us is being led by Mark Zuckerberg, and I went to one of the events, and it was interesting to see that the focus was on Dreamers and on H-1B, and whilst they may say talk something about unauthorized immigrants, the view is very, very, very tech specific. And this is where I think all the big boys from Microsoft to Google to Facebook to Dropbox combined, and that's fundamentally because they need more H-1Bs for the best engineers from around the world. The other industries who do it more quietly and are not so well known happen to be big oil. Now, most people don't know that a lot of the best engineers in big oil are increasingly coming from outside of the US. Many of them come to Rice University for a PhD and then go on to work in various aspects of big oil. Similarly, any industry with a high degree of skill requirement is pushing for some kind of immigration reform, particularly where mathematical and scientific skills are required. And obviously, tech is at the forefront. And I would point out that in tech, in the US now, we tend to mean tech as just software. And for me, that is a travesty. Because software is a part of science. It is not the only thing, and it's not as important as it is made out to be. So there's a lot of self-glorification going on and self-interest going on, and actually that's why the issue is so complicated.
Well, I agree with that. I was glad to hear that. I think that software is overemphasized. On the other hand, the fact is that if you look at the data for H-1B, that is by far the largest category. So we can't ignore it.
Excellent. Thank you all for responding to that question. I'm going to turn to a question from the group 6, and that's, why aren't the family visa privileges uniform across the visas? Let me just repeat that. Why aren't the family visa privileges uniform across the visas?
I'm not sure what the questioner is really asking, but if you are talking about the difference between immediate relatives or the preference categories. I guess I'll address that first. The immediate relatives, that being a spouse of a U.S. citizen or a child of a U.S. citizen under 21 or parent of a U.S. citizen, those are given preference because that's immediate family, and they have the privilege of being immediate family members of U.S. citizens. So there's no wait time for the visa. The visa is immediately available to immediate family. And then it breaks down into preference categories after that in terms of order of priority, with children over 21, married of U.S. citizens, and then the family members of green card holders, and then the brothers and sisters category, and there's a few subdivisions in there as well. And I believe that the preference categories have been put in place to do exactly that, give preference to the most important family members as Congress deemed them to be. Again, giving preference to immediate family members of then lawful permanent residents after U.S. citizens, and then brothers and sisters. That's a remote category that in the Comprehensive Immigration Reform discussion, they've actually been considering doing away with that category. And then it breaks down in terms of preference of countries. There's a waiting line for countries like Mexico and the Philippines and India that's longer than other chargeability areas, simply because the number of people petitioning from those countries is so vastly huge. So a relative from Mexico waiting for a visa is going to wait much longer than someone coming from Cameroon, for instance. So if you take a look at the Visa Bulletin, which is available, just Google Visa Bulletin. It's put out by the State Department. It gives a very good explanation of the preference categories and how it breaks down by wait time. It changes every month depending on how many visas are subscribed to. And one other important thing is the priority date is set by the I-130 petition. When that is first filed, for instance, by a U.S. citizen spouse, they file that I-130 petition. That starts the wait time.
Thank you very much, Lisa, for that response. Let me see. Norm, would you like to address the same question?
Well, I don't think I understood the question any more than Lisa did. It was pretty vague, and it could have meant a lot of things. But just to make a comment, in terms of H-1B, the hot issue now, in terms of family, is whether the spouses should get work privileges. And the Obama administration is on the verge of basically bypassing Congress and just dictating that they will have such privileges. So that's really a big issue. I should point out that the H-1B work visa has been mentioned a number of times already, but to me, the employment-based green cards are also just as big an issue with just as many important aspects. So I hope we don't lose sight of that.
Atul, would you also like to address this question?
About Obama?
No, sorry. The question
bypassing the Congress?
Let me repeat the question. Why aren't the family visa privileges uniform across the visas?
No, I don't know enough to comment on that, and when I don't know, I just have learned. I'm old enough to have learned to say I don't know.
Well, so I'm just going to use moderator's privilege to just ask one part of this, which is in the briefing document, and this may have prompted the question, there was a description of the Senate reform, if it were to pass, that it would have some family preferences show up as a matter of points. Let me just understand, does the Senate bill make family visa privileges more uniform across visas, or not? That may have been a context for the question to come up, given the way we wrote the briefing.
I mean, I read the Senate bill probably about, when it first came out, the 700 to 800 page document that it was, and to my recollection, I don't recall that there was a change in the preference categories, except there was discussion about whether to do away with the fourth preference category, which was petitioning a U.S. citizen person petitioning for their brother or sister. And the reason that they would look at that is, and it was brought out in the report that you produced, is that that is, first of all, huge waiting lines for that. It's almost not practical to petition for your brother or sister. And second of all, it does result in chain migration. But there's a lot of chain migration in the other categories as well. So I'm not sure how much of a dent it would make in the chain migration, but in some ways, it's a bit of an unnecessary category. Siblings aren't necessarily your immediate family. You know, you grow up and you're 30 years old and your brother's 40 years old and they have their family and you have your family. And the problem with the chain migration that people may be concerned about is when you have an immediate family relative and you petition for them. So if I'm a U.S. citizen and I have a German husband that I've filed a petition for, I have to file a separate petition for him and for my children. You know, if he's got children in Germany, for instance, that become my stepchildren. When you're talking about the preference categories, then every relative who's listed on the petition can now immigrate as derivative beneficiaries, and that does result in vast numbers of people coming to the United States under that same petition category. So if we're allowing brothers and sisters to then bring all of their children, yeah, we're talking about a lot of numbers of people, and maybe those visas would be better allocated to other areas, perhaps employment-based visas or a point system. You know, I think that's what they're thinking about.
Thank you. That's very helpful, Lisa. Let me go to the next question Group 4 asked, is there really going to be the massive shortage of technical workers as predicted when the current business culture in the US does not entice American entrepreneurs to expand their workforce, parentheses, ACA, close parentheses? And B, because many jobs that were traditionally done in-house, systems administration, server maintenance, are now being outsourced to data centers here and abroad. Let me just repeat that because it's a two-part question. Is there really going to be the massive shortage of technical workers as predicted when the current business culture in the US does not entice American entrepreneurs to expand their workforce, ACA, and because many jobs that were traditionally done in-house, systems administration, server maintenance, are now being outsourced to data centers here and abroad? Norm, would you like to address that?
Yeah, actually, I think let's take the last part first. The whole issue of offshoring, I think, has been greatly exaggerated. There are a lot of things that just can't be done remotely like that. Second, the bigger issue that was brought up in the question is issues of shortages. I would refer everybody watching this to Michael Teitelbaum's new book. He was a vice president of the Sloan Foundation for a long time, in charge of research, and he's been at Harvard the last couple of years. He knows what he's talking about. He's a demographer, and he gives a history of all of these scares that came out about shortages in tech that never materialized, and he talks about the motivations as well. I'm a little bit surprised that the questioner didn't presume that we have a shortage now, because that's the claim made by the industry. It's clearly false. The wages are not going up, or they're going up, a little bit. If you have a shortage of labor, wages should be going up very fast. You don't have to be a professional economist to understand that. So it's just a kind of a non-issue, and it's. I would guess I would also mention at this point that the industry, the tech industry, hires the best PR people in the world, and a lot of times what they say is quite deceptive.
I was going to turn to a tool to see whether you have comments on the question or what Norm just said in response to the question.
No, I completely agree with you that with Norm, that the tech industry can be extremely deceptive. And I personally think that I have a contrarian view on this. I divide my time between the UK, India, and the US. So whilst I have an EB1 green card, I'm not exactly a resident 12 months a year. I'm legally a resident in the sense I fulfill the requirement of minimum stay. But I my own journal, the work is distributed because editing is something I just can't trust Americans to do. I teach at Berkeley, and Americans no longer know how to write. I have to fundamentally rely on my team in London. I get people who've got straight A's and 4.0 GPAs who don't know where to put a comma.
Right.
So
I agree.
leave aside STEM skill shortages. Leave aside STEM skill shortages. Americans who speak just one language. I say Americans speak even that one language badly.
I agree, by the way.
Well, Norm, we seem to agree today a lot, so we are not having much debate. But going back to it, you know, the editing team is in London. My own personal example, my technology team is in Jaipur, not even in Delhi or Bangalore, because, you know, I'm running things on the cheap. So I personally think that a lot of the so-called job creation, which Norm points out that there would be upward pressure on wages, and you know, since Reagan, there has been no upward pressure on wages. So a lot of people will start voting with their feet and move out. Just giving you a case in point. 10 years ago, all the Brazilians who came out of Wharton Business School stayed in New York, except one. My year, all except one went back. They went back to Sao Paulo. They went back to other places. A number of foreign students had jobs in the US. They went to the Hong Kongs, the Singapores, even London, or surprisingly, Thailand. So, you know, this whole talk that there'll be, you know, this whole talk that, you know, America will, American entrepreneurs are not incentivized to have jobs. It's partly, you know, it's not just that. It is partly just the winds of change. I'm a historian by training. So over the last 5 centuries, what has happened is a shift of power from the east to the west. The 2 largest economies in human history have been China and India. And they were not beaten by trade wars, they were beaten by gunships. What you're seeing is fundamentally a rebalancing. The current economic order won't exist, and once that starts to change, which it is changing, you will see immigration patterns change too. This is not to say that there won't be demand for certain skills here in the US. This is not to say that you don't need new visa regulation. The current one sucks. I had to go through it. To get an EB1 was a nightmare. To get an H1B was a nightmare. And, you know, I've done a fair bit in my life. So I'm not saying you don't need new regulation, but the entire complexion and pattern of immigration will change. And this won't just change for the US. It will change globally. It is already changing. Look at Europe. Look at the waves coming from the Middle East into Europe. The waves in waves. The Middle East is seeing its own version of the 30 Years' War. So things are changing, and things will change dramatically. And by the way, the immigration is not just to Europe. From a lot of places which are erupting. Immigration is to other neighboring countries too. I mean, for example, immigration from Afghanistan has been to Pakistan, which has been covered, but has also been to Iran, which has not been covered as much. So the whole ebb and flow of peoples that has always existed. Nation states are a very new phenomenon. They came in 1648 after the Treaty of Westphalia. And the modern nation state is only a 20th century phenomenon, really. Before that, people could move. And by white European settlers who just decided they owned the land. It was the concept of terra nulla. So, you know, patterns change throughout human history. They are going to change again in the 21st century.
Thank you. Thank you, Atul. I appreciate you taking the time to share a larger context to the question. Let me just give Lisa a chance to also see if she would like to respond to this question, or to what Atul or Norm said.
No, I'm good. Thanks.
Thank you. So, okay, I'm going to go to the next question then. This is from group 1. I'm going to start with going to Norm on this question. what are the unique benefits of the startup visa proposal compared to opportunities available in our current visa system? And just to mention, to clarify, in the briefing document, there are two different startup visas mentioned. There's the U.S. one that was proposed in the Senate bill, and then there's also an explanation of the U.K.'s entrepreneurship visa. Both are discussed in the briefing materials. But Norm, would you like to take this?
Well, okay, I actually can't say that much because I don't know a lot about those proposals. I will say that I think the whole issue of entrepreneurship in tech has been also exaggerated. I used that word a minute ago. The idea that all we have to do is change the immigration system and all of a sudden we're going to have all these great new companies, that's just not realistic. And so I think the whole issue is a little bit tangential.
Atul, would you like to address this?
Well, I would just say that I agree with Norm that the whole issue is tangential. It's seen as a silver bullet, but it's good to have entrepreneur visas. The UK model generally has worked, actually. To my surprise, I was in the UK. I have a lot of friends with whom I used to debate in Oxford who are now in British politics. And we had a number of interesting discussions. And one of the most interesting things to see in London was that the number of entrepreneurs coming into London from the former Commonwealth has increased because London has the capital and has the time zone advantage. However, London doesn't have the culture, so people have come, but they are still struggling. It's no Silicon Valley, so Norm is bang on the money when he says, just the visa system won't help, but it's part of the picture. And going into the technicalities of it, well, the US visa proposal would allow 75,000 entrepreneurs, and it basically doesn't go into the details as to the funding required. The UK visa, because UK being an older financial center, actually has a specific amount of funding that you need, and then you get a visa for 3 years, and then you can get permanent residence for 5 years. So the US system doesn't give the route to permanent residency, but it does not have, it has a lower bar. Whilst the UK visa has a higher bar, but a longer horizon. I personally think perhaps a combination of the two might work best. But as again Norm said, it's not going to be a magic bullet for entrepreneurship. But I think it's needed. It's a good idea.
I'd actually like to just quickly comment. I'm a little, again, outside my area of expertise, but we do have the EB-5 visa in this country, and the minimum investment in an area that's in need of jobs, a rural area in West Virginia, for instance, is 500,000, and in an urban area, it's $1 million, and it does lead to a green card. That said, it's a complicated process.
Yes.
It merges many. I actually was a corporate lawyer before being an immigration lawyer, and it merges a lot of different areas of law, securities law, first and foremost, corporate law. You need to do a market study. You have to have an economic analysis. You need to hire, a very reputable accounting firm. So there's a lot of ducks that need to be put in place before you even ever get to the immigration phase of an EB-5 visa. So it's a complicated, arduous process with a relatively, compared to other visas, low approval rate because of all the intricacies of getting this visa. And so I'm not really sure what the startup visa that's mentioned, how that would differ and what the requirements would be compared to the EB-5 that we already have, that has been in existence for a while.
So I'll just mention from the briefing document, and I'm only going to speak of factual information contained in the briefing document. So the experts are the experts on this on the plenary. But in the briefing document, we described that the EB-5 allows people to immigrate to the U.S. by investing in other people's business. They don't have to be the entrepreneur managing that business. where in the UK, startup visa allows people to apply to an accelerator, and if they get into the accelerator, they get guaranteed funding sufficient for the requirements and a visa to that. So
there's one more thing, Bobby. Bobby, the entrepreneur visa will be available to people who are already in the US. It is not available for everyone. So if you come out as a student, or if you are on an H-1B, then you can be an entrepreneur. And this is where I would have benefited a great deal from such a visa, because staying on in this country was a nightmare. And actually, it should be told, I questioned why I stayed on, actually, and a lot of people questioned, and so that lack of a startup visa, meaning if I want to go and work for Goldman Sachs, that's easy, they'll get me an H-1B. However, if I want to start my own gig, it's crazy. So I think it makes sense for the existing student or the H-1B, because it does not tie them in bonded labor, which is what, quite often between you and me, is what H-1B becomes. People hate their job, but they will stay on to get the green card.
Right. Actually, I'd like to add something. I said that I thought this was rather tangential. I think Atul makes good points, though. But I would actually mention something about something else that Atul brought up, which was he said that he had gone through the EB-1 green card process for outstanding people. And personally, I think, if we want to look at immigration policy as what is benefiting, the national interest, broadly defined, hard to define, but whatever it is, I personally feel that we should liberalize EB-1. I've said that before. I've said we should liberalize the O-1 work visa for outstanding people. I think that just from an economic point of view, a national interest point of view, that would actually have a much better impact than something like a startup visa.
And a lot less complicated.
Thank you all for those further responses to that question. That was very helpful in elucidating this. And what I wanted to turn to next is Group 4's question. Group 4 asked, what is the estimated deficient for visas of those with advanced degrees? Might be deficiency. What is the estimated deficit or deficiency for visas for those with advanced degrees? Is this a path to permanent residence? Is the current quota sufficient? What is the current quota for H-1B visas?
A lot of questions in there. When you ask about what is enough, you really have to define what you mean. Is it enough for the employers? They can't get enough because, as I said, they do want cheap immobile labor. I just mentioned that some of them want to hire the best and the brightest. I strongly, strongly support that. But you can see statistically, you can see the paper I did, for instance, and other papers, that the vast majority of H-1Bs are just simply not in that league. They're ordinary people doing ordinary work. The employers want cheap labor. They want de facto indentured labor, as Atul mentioned. That's really what's going on. A lot of people don't realize that. The idea of having somebody, if you're an employer, you don't want, let's say in the tech industry again, you don't want an engineer to leave your urgent project and leave you in the lurch. And having this de facto indentured servitude is hugely important to those employers, much more than even the wage issue. So the problem is, what I'm saying then, is that you have to define, when you say deficiency or adequacy of visa caps, is from whose point of view? Again, from a national interest point of view, I would argue that the caps are too high as they are.
Could I just ask, Norm, do you have a comment on the other part of the question, which is this a path to permanent residency? And,
well, I think we really ought to defer to Lisa on that. I mean, I actually could answer it, but there are various levels, as we discussed, EB1, EB2, EB3, and Lisa can elaborate, I'm sure.
You're talking about the H-1Bs being a path to permanent residency? Is that what we're focused on?
Let me reread the question one more time, and you can take what part of it as you would. What is the estimated deficit or deficiency for visas of those with advanced degrees? Is this a path to permanent residence? Is the current quota sufficient? And what is the current quota for H-1Bs?
Well, the quota numbers are mentioned in your document. I believe there's 66,000 H-1B visas available. Jim Alexander would have been a great person for this panel discussion because H-1Bs are his specialty, and I know from talking with him during H-1B season in April that those visas run out immediately. And what's worse is an employer can spend all the money petitioning for someone, and then it really goes to a lottery system. So it can be a grand waste of money and time for everyone involved. So that's one very problematic issue with the H-1Bs is you can't even count on after you go through the process that you're going to get it. An H-1B is what's called a dual intent visa. So there are certain visa categories that are both a non-immigrant, which means they're a temporary visa, and an immigrant, which means it's a permanent residency visa. So although the H-1B is a dual intent visa, it is a non-immigrant visa, but you can then later be petitioned for a green card by your employer. And if you do go down that path, once you get to your adjustment interview with a USCIS officer, you will not be questioned about, well, your intent was really to come on a temporary basis to the United States, and now we see that you're applying for permanent residency. Boom, this is immigration fraud. We're going to deny your adjustment of status, which is the same as getting an immigrant visa. So it's a dual intent in that sense that you can eventually have the employer petition for a green card for you.
Thank you, Lisa.
Could I add something else, Bobby?
Yes, no.
So the one of the implicit assumptions in the questioner's line that somehow people with graduate degrees are more preferable, and I don't agree with that at all. At least in the computer fields, all you have to do is look at people like Steve Jobs and Larry Ellison and Bill Gates, and the list goes on, people that don't even have a bachelor's degree, let alone a graduate degree. So I don't think any preference should be given there, and there already is some preference. Of course, there's a separate 20,000 visa category with an H-1B for that, and I don't think that was ever justified.
Let me turn to Atul. Would you have a comment on this question, Atul?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Now,
your video, Atul, could you turn your camera back on? It cut out for a moment.
Okay. Is it on?
The camera's not on, but we can hear you.
Okay. Here's the deal. If you look at Brazil, in Brazil, if you get the equivalent of H-1B, it is not tied to an employer. You get into the country, you're a worker. You can change employers. Personally, between you and me, I find America, in many ways, a feudal country, except that instead of old aristocrats like me, it is the new corporate barons like Mark Zuckerberg who rule the roost. And by that I mean very simply is your healthcare is tied to your employer. That's bullshit. Your visa is tied to your employer. That means the employer can basically squeeze you. You're indentured labor. You have to serve your time. You can't leave on projects. You can't get a pay rise. You're usually kept at the bottom tier. Now, if you want a flexible, competitive labor market, then you would adopt the Brazilian system, wherein, okay, you're a qualified worker, the economy needs you, you're here for 3 years, and if you wanted to move from Facebook to Google, you could. You couldn't be unemployed. If you were unemployed, you'd get kicked out. But the point is this, is that the entire visa system is predicated for the benefit of, frankly, larger corporations. It's very difficult for small companies to get H-1Bs. It's a real nightmare, especially as Lisa said, it runs out so quickly. So it's predicated for the benefit of large employers having a pliable workforce and being able to indulge in wage suppression. And as you know, a case has come up about all these companies which
Atul, you're breaking up. If we'll return to you in just a minute, and hopefully we can ensure the connection will be sufficient for us to hear you. But we've lost the ability to hear you, so I don't want to have you keep going while we can't understand the words. So we
If
look
I could,
forward. Go ahead, Lisa.
yeah, I just want to add something, and again, I hate to keep prefacing that, I don't practice in this area, but it is important to know that immigration law lawyers do have their specialties. It's such a complex area of the law. But I know the perspective of an immigration lawyer, and what we see often, well, not often, but it comes up with clients, is that people want to get a foot in the door to come to the United States. And so the H-1B is designed for the employer's benefit. They're the ones who are paying the money. They're required to pay the legal fees and the filing fees for the H-1B process. There are portability provisions. So if you find a new employer, you can port your H-1B under certain circumstances. But quite frankly, there is another side to this, and that is, yes, these workers are brought over at the behest of the employer for the right or the wrong, and if you don't like it, you can always choose to go back to your country. If you're an educated person, presumably, you would have some opportunities, certainly more opportunities than the clients I see that are undocumented, unskilled, uneducated persons. And if you're here on an H-1B visa, presumably you have other options available to you than just staying in the United States. So I think there is another perspective to look at, and balance that with the fact that we do have an American workforce here that needs jobs as well. So I'm just kind of offering that other perspective, that as an immigration lawyer, I see a lot of people come to this country just to get a foot in the door to be here. And, there are sacrifices that sometimes come with that decision.
Thank you, Lisa. Atul, now that you're back with us, would you like to finish your thought from before?
I mean, I think Lisa has a point. What I was saying is, as I see, most of drafting a constitution or law is balancing rights and responsibilities, benefits and costs in society. And in my view, America has become a society which is weighed way too heavily in favor of big corporations. So just, you look at healthcare, that's tied to your employer. It shouldn't be. They shouldn't be paying for it. Actually, that was the 1940s.
Excellent. Thank you, Atul, for sharing that. And I want to go to the next question. So let me just turn to it. So the next question. Sorry for the connection difficulties for those tuning in, but we'll return to Atul again when we can see and hear him again. I want to ask the final question of this plenary came from Group 6, and that question is: how are the current and proposed limits on H-1B visas decided on? It sounds like the number has been set in the law, but why that number? I would presume not another limit, not another number. Again, let me repeat the question: how are the current and proposed limits on H-1B visas decided on? Norm, would you like to address that?
Yeah, actually, there are a couple of interesting points there. One is that we differ from Canada, for example, and I'm not saying for better or worse, but in Canada, the limits are flexible, whereas for us in the U.S., it's written into the law. And so you have for H-1B 65,000 visas per year with various exemptions, renewals, for example. You have the 20,000 for the people with advanced degrees from U.S. universities. This has gone up and down legislatively in the late 90s. It was doubled first in 1998 to something like 130,000. I don't remember the exact figure. And then in year 2000, it was increased a lot again to, I believe, 195,000. These were temporary changes. The law specified that the changes would sunset, and they did, and we're back to the 65,000 that was originally set by the 1990 Act. There's a little bit more, though, on this, which is interesting, and that is um, the original 65,000 was actually set as part of the GATT, basically the World Trade Treaty. There are people who believe, for example, that that treaty binds us to not reducing the 65,000 to something less. So that's something that enters into the mix also. I did want to make a point about one more point on the last question. I think that what Atul and Lisa said may have been perceived as somewhat at odds with each other, and they really weren't. There is a big difference between the H-1B work visa and the EB series green cards. The people who are merely holding an H-1B do have a fair degree of mobility, not totally good, but they can go from Google to Facebook, as Atul was talking about. They actually can do that. But if they're being sponsored for a green card, they're really stuck. They have the legal right to move, of course, but that would mean starting the process again, going into the labor cert process again, which is a nightmare, as Atul correctly said. That's unthinkable. So they are stuck, as Atul also said. And of course, that brings all kinds of negative consequences. I also wanted to piggyback on something else Atul said about the big companies. Something that hasn't come up yet is sort of the mainstream U.S. firms like Google and Facebook and IBM and whatever, versus the largely Indian firms that do outsourcing. And one thing that I've written about, and I feel very strongly about, is that the second group, the Indian outsourcing firms, have been unfairly blamed for a lot of stuff because, in fact, the mainstream firms are just as culpable, arguably even more so because the outsourcing firms generally don't sponsor their workers for green cards, whereas the mainstream firms, the Googles and the Facebooks and the IBMs do. And they do like this de facto indentured servitude. So arguably, they're the ones that are abusing this system even more.
Atul, let me turn to you for a moment and repeat the question for you. So the question is, how are the current and proposed limits on H-1B decided on? Would you like to add to what Norm said, or respond to what he said, or respond to the question? Sounds like there's microphone difficulty.
No, I think no.
Okay, now I can hear you. Great. I heard you for a moment there. Okay, let me turn to Lisa. Lisa, would you like to address this question, or do you have a comment on it?
I honestly don't have the background as to why Congress allocated that number of visas.
Okay. Atul, now I think you're back. Are you back to answer, or? Okay. Seem to be having little technical difficulties, but we will ensure that we're in good position for the second plenary to overcome these difficulties. I think that we have gone through now all the 6 questions from these groups. Let me just give each of the panelists one last chance to add anything further in response to any of the 6 questions and the discussion between them that they've received. And after those concluding replies, then we'll conclude this first plenary session.
I guess I just want to sort of give a perspective as an immigration lawyer that works with a largely undocumented population. That first of all, getting adjustment of status an immigrant visa, a green card, all three of those terms mean the same thing. That is an incredibly big deal to get a green card in the United States if this is where you want to make your home. Um, there's a lot of people that seek for years to get a green card and never have access to that. There's a lot of background checking that goes into getting a green card. It's also quite an expensive process to get a green card. The filing fee alone is $1,070. And that's not include. That's only for the I-485 form. That's not including all the prior petitions that are filed to get you to that point. So we're talking about an elite group of people. When you look at the broader perspective of 11 million undocumented persons in the United States, all of whom would do anything they could to get a green card. And so I have had clients that work at tech companies, more as a corporate lawyer, obviously, than now in the work I do. And yes, there is some time that I've heard clients complain of, oh, I'm like just sticking it out for my employer to get me a green card. But then after that, you've got this ticket to live in the United States for the rest of your life, as long as you don't violate the terms of your green card. And so I just kind of want to put it in perspective that if you want to be in the United States, having a green card is still a privilege, not a right. And I think that we should keep that in perspective.
Atul, I think that we see you now well, and we can let you respond both to the last question, which we cut you off from, and anything else from these 6 questions. The last question was, how are the current and proposed limits on H-1B visas decided on? You're welcome to reply to that or any of the other questions that have come up in this plenary discussion.
Well, I mean, at the moment, we are just continuing
You're
with
muted.
the...
Atul, please unmute the mic.
Yeah. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Not yet. We can't hear you yet.
Okay.
While Atul's getting ready, let's turn to Norm. Norm, would you like to respond to anything else in this plenary before we let Atul have one more shot at a concluding set of remarks?
Yeah, actually, what Lisa just said is enormously important. The huge value of a green card to a lot of people. That has waned somewhat, as Atul was mentioning, that the world is changing. Third world is becoming more attractive to stay home, for instance. There's less interest now in coming here from China or India, for instance. I know the China case very well. On the other hand, the interest still is a very high level and will be for some time. And the point is that that actually has implications for other things. It means, for instance, that people are willing to work for less money because they're getting this non-monetary compensation in the form of a green card sponsorship. And it's just like, you know, if somebody, an American worker, if they have a choice between 2 employers, one of whom offers free on-site daycare and the worker has small kids, then that's non-monetary compensation, and the person might be, you know, quite interested in taking that job instead of a higher-paying one somewhere else. And so when the whole issue of H-1B, for instance, as cheap labor comes up, you really have to factor that in, this non-monetary form of compensation.
Thank you, Norm. Atul, would you like to have any concluding remarks in response to any of these questions?
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Okay. We'll be seeing Atul again for the second plenary today, and I'm sure the microphone issue will be addressed by then. So we will be in good shape to hear the rest of what he has to say in due course this afternoon. I'd like to thank Norm and Lisa and Atul for offering the perspectives that they did as experts on immigration today, this morning. I also want to speak to all of the participants who are tuning in. We are now going to go to the lunch break for these discussions. So you will be reconvening with your moderators in 1 hour to then continue with your small group discussions in the afternoon. There will then be a second plenary this afternoon, followed by another round of your small group discussions. Again, this is the TechCrunch, Reframe It, Knight Foundation, Silicon Valley Community Foundation, Miami Community Foundation, National Online Dialogue about Immigration Reform within the technology community. I'm grateful for all of your participation, and with that, we're going to sign off from this plenary. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Yeah.